Great job, choir. Got us oriented on the topic. I'm going to be talking about food today, which is kind of relevant to most of us. Andy Rooney once said that the two most popular books at any bookstore are cookbooks and diet books. One tells you how to prepare it, the other tells you not to eat it. Orson Welles once said, my doctor has advised me to give up those intimate little dinners for four, unless, of course, there are three other people eating with you. By the end of the sermon, I want to suggest that the entire Bible is a food book. On the first Sunday of our Lenten series, where we've been talking about who we are and what we do, I offered to you several of those. You know you're a disciple if sayings. And I'm going to offer you some more today. David has a Chalice pen on his pocket. It's like the picture that you see up there. And so remember that when you hear this one. You might be a disciple if your airplane seatmate sees your lapel pin and asks why you're against drinking. Here's another one. You might be a disciple if you worship in a different disciples' congregation and discover yet another way to have communion. For me, this is the third time I'll be having communion today, and all three times are different. If you remember back in February, we had a different kind of communion bread each week. Finally, you might be a disciple if your elder prays about wine, but you receive grape juice. In the New Testament, we read about Jesus turning the water into wine. Here we turn the wine into Welch's grape juice. Today, our topic for who we are and what we do is communion. And our practices and beliefs around the Lord's table are central for who we are and what we stand for, what we believe. You know, before there were sermons, before clergy were ordained, before there were choirs and pianos and organs and hymnals. In fact, before there were Bibles. Did you know early church, they didn't have the New Testament. It wasn't even written. And it was quite some time until the Gutenberg press was invented that they began to make enough Bibles that were not just hand copies, that most churches had them. Until that time, there were very few of them. Early churches didn't have church buildings. But even though they didn't have a lot of the things that we associate with church, they had one thing in common with us, and that's communion. And when the early leaders of the Christian church, disciples, were thinking about how they were going to do church together, communion was very central. They decided to have it something that we do every Sunday. They wanted to rekindle the spirit and the origin of the Lord's Supper. It became a central part of what we do every Sunday. And largely because of their experience, it is what we call an open table. Open table means that anyone and everyone is welcome to participate. It's not me that makes that decision. It's not our elder that makes the decision. We feel like it's the Lord who invites, and it's between you and the Lord whether you participate or not. And we do this because we think that when we saw who Jesus ate and drank with, he ate and drank with people that most of the religious people of his day wouldn't have associated with. He ate with tax collectors and prostitutes and other people who were sinners. And we think that is wonderful. Because if he would do that, he's welcome to eat with us. Because we're not perfect. You know, parts of the church refer to communion as Eucharist, which means thanksgiving. And I've heard someone say that the secret to happiness is knowing that you're getting what you don't deserve. When we come to this table, we're getting what we don't deserve. I believe that this table is the strength of who we are. I believe that this table is the foundation upon which we need to build our mission to the world. We have not always been very good at retaining our young people. We do pretty good with them while they're in grade school and maybe middle school and sort of during high school. But once they get off to college, we begin to say, now where did they go? They're gone. Did you know that the Amish community retains 95% of their children? 95% of the children who grow up in the Amish community remain Amish. There's that show, of course, that's made a lot of news. It's called Breaking Amish, where they took 6 young people and plopped them down in New York City and let them, as Amish people, to see how they would adjust. Actually, what has come out is that those 6 people were not necessarily a part of an Amish community to begin with. They had kind of broken with that already. But the reality is that when an Amish person turns 16, they're offered what is called rumspringa, a chance to taste and see what the rest of the world is like, that to sow their wild oats, if you will. But while they're out doing that, their family still sets a table setting for them. And in fact, they oftentimes will put food on their plate. And so while they're out there, they know that back home, a table has been set for them, a place been reserved for them. And all of their younger siblings are watching this, and they know that when it comes to be their time, that they go out into the world, that there will be a place reserved for them at home. I think there's something that we could learn from that. Making sure that our young people know that we always have a place for them, that we're always thinking of them. The population of the world is around 7 billion and growing. There are approximately 7 million Jews in Israel. The other 7 million are spread around the other parts of the world, most of them here in the United States. But they make up about 1% of the world's population. And yet when they hand out the Nobel Prizes for things like medicine and chemistry and economics and literature and peace and physics, of the Nobel Prizes, about 40% of those prizes go to Jewish people. When it comes to the arts, it's even a higher percentage. If you watched the Oscars here a couple weeks ago, about 45% of those go to Jewish people. The Jewish people have a very impressive record of human achievements. Even in the century when humanity tried to exterminate the Jews, do you know who ended up being the person of that century? Albert Einstein, a Jew. How does that happen? Some have shown that it's because their highest and their holiest moment is not in the synagogue, but it's in their home around the table where they tell their story. And they don't put the kids off in a separate little table off in some other place. They're part of the main table, and when they tell the story, it's not a story of something that happened long, long ago in a land far, far away. When they tell about Moses saying, "Let my people go," it's not Moses way back then saying it, but it's them saying it. It's part of their story. From day one, the story is open to questioning. If the story can't survive the questioning, it shouldn't be a part of the story. If you have a question, bring it to the table. Bring it on. If you've ever gone to a Passover meal, it's the food that drives the story. Taste and see that the Lord is good. Around the table, their young people build their identity, while we have this tendency to send our kids off to college to find themselves, while they're also receiving about 3,000 different advertisements a day telling them what they need to do and to have to form their identity. The table is the greatest story that we fail to tell. Jesus was a foodie. So much of the story of Jesus revolves around sitting at a table and eating. A couple of years ago, while I was on sabbatical, you did a fall Bible study about the meals of Jesus, from the miracle of Jesus at the Cana Galilee when he turned the water into wine, to when he was eating meals with tax collectors and feeding the 1,000 with 5 loaves and 2 fish, the Last Supper. We have the best story in the world right here. Movies and TVs have tried to pick up on the importance of the table. When I was growing up, it was the Waltons. Do you remember them sitting around the table, sharing and praying their days? Julie's favorite movie is The Blind Side. There's a wonderful story that happened there at a Thanksgiving meal. Now, it's not really according to my taste so much, but Duck Dynasty also concludes with a prayer around a meal each day. I know some people have roasted preacher on Sunday for dinner. But sadly, the dinner table is being written out of many homes. Did you know that some people are building homes now without a dining room? They think, well, we don't eat at the dining room table anymore anyway, so why waste all that money doing it? Well, they would waste the money if they knew the statistics. The statistics say that there's a higher level of achievement in grade school, middle school, high school, and college that directly correlates with the number of meals that a family eats together around a table. There's somehow they figured out that this number 3, that it has to be this minimum of 3 before it kind of begins to take off. That's the greatest indicators. You don't have anybody at your home? Find somebody. If you can't find somebody, grab a pet and eat with them. You know, Jesus was born in a manger, a feeding trough. He had animals around him. Did you know that Steve Jobs, who was arguably one of the greatest innovators and inventors of our time, he brought us all those electronic gadgets that we have, that when he sat down together at a dining room table, he made them leave those behind? Not too bad. Bless her heart, there is a lady in a Thai restaurant in Silverton, Oregon, that will give you the dickens if you pull out your smartphone and begin to use it while you're at her restaurant. How do I know? I love that restaurant. Keep going back. What happens around the table doesn't happen anywhere else. Basketball enthusiasts will know that about the rivalry between Magic Johnson and Larry Bird, rivals in college, rivals in pro, had a great animosity towards each other. But now they're best friends. Do you know what happened? They sat around a table together. What got Jesus killed? Table talk. Who he ate with at the table. His ministry begins and ends at the table. We always think of his Last Supper, but actually that wasn't the Last Supper he had. After the resurrection, he was walking along with some of his disciples, went to their house and had dinner. It was while he was breaking bread that they recognized who he was. Later on, it was around the Sea of Galilee, having sort of a fish barbecue with his disciples. The first and last words of the Bible are related to food. I think you can say that not only was Jesus a foodie, but God is a foodie. What are the first words of God to humanity? In Genesis 1, God says, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is upon the face of the earth, and every tree with its fruit. You shall have them for food. It says the same thing about animals. Then we go to the second chapter of Genesis. And for some reason, we get this convoluted idea that's all about what you're not supposed to eat. And then we translate that into everything about God. God's more about prohibition than giving us permission. But look what he actually says. You may freely eat of every tree in the garden. God is more concerned about the freedom given to us than what we can't eat. If you go all the way to the opposite end of the Bible, just a few pages back from the maps, it closes with these last words in Revelation and John. Let everyone who is thirsty come. So the bookends of the Bible are eat and drink. And everything in between is a table. And there in the 3rd chapter of Revelation, John, it says, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in to you and dine with you, and you with me." The Bible's most prominent description of heaven is not sitting around in a Bible study. It's not laying back on a cloud playing a harp. It's sitting around a banqueting table. God desires to break bread with us for eternity. My father passed away a little over 4 years ago, and when he passed away, they had a memorial service for him in Prineville, and I was impressed by how many of you decided to come over and be a part of it. He was a member of the Old Time Fiddlers Association and was known for one particular song that he sang a lot, probably the only one he ever sang. He was just usually played songs. And they had asked me to sing the song with them, but I didn't think I could get through it. But I'm going to try to get through it today. It's one that Johnny Cash used to sing called Supper Time. Many years ago, in days of childhood, I used to play till evening shadows come, and winding down that old familiar pathway, I'd hear my mother call at set of sun. Come home, it's supper time. The shadows lengthen fast. Come home, it's supper time. We're going home at last. Growing up, our dining room looked out across the Three Sisters. Remember many meals of enjoying the time that we spent together. As I grew older, I came to realize that all of us will one day be able to gather around the great table of God and share in the supper time. Softly and tenderly, Jesus is calling, calling for you and for me. See on the portal, he's waiting and watching, watching for you and for me. Come home, come home. Ye who are weary, come home. Earnestly, tenderly, Jesus is calling, calling, oh sinner, come home. Come home, come home, it's supper time. The shadows lengthen fast. Come home, it's supper time. We're going home at last. Let's join in prayer. God, we thank you for this table that's here every Sunday, and we just kind of take it for granted. But it is our opportunity to know that we are loved far more than we deserved. It's our chance to know that we are part of a large community of people. We care for them and they care for us. It's our chance to be able to shine in your kingdom. Bless us. Help us to realize the pleasure we have in coming at this table. And all these things we pray in your name. Amen. We invite you as the deacons come forward to share together in our unison confession of faith.